Welcome back, fellow jazz bums. Today we have Zev Feldman returning. We have Record Store Day coming up, and we have a number of titles that we're going to talk about and learn more about. A new title by Blue Note that Zev has been involved in. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Felipe to get us started.
Thanks, Mike. Chris, welcome back, Zev, champion of the channel.
Thanks
Uh,
for having me, guys. Good to be with you.
yeah, just as a reminder for the ones who had not been on planet Earth for the past decade, Zev Feldman, label owner, music producer, record executive. He's been involved in so much throughout the decades almost, and he has been involved lately, the past decade or so, even more, right, Zev? With discovering these great recordings, great archival, a testament to history. So today, as usual, we're going to go over some Record Store Day titles that are coming next Black Friday, next Friday. But first, this record that just came out yesterday has been talked about a lot, and of course, Zev has his hands all over it. So we go back to Slugs today, right? McCoy Tyner and Joe Henderson live at Slugs. Apparently, a tape that was found at Jack Jonette's personal vault catalog. It was brought back to life. It's a never before issue recording. An amazing session. I got my copy. I had a review copy for a few weeks already on digital, but the way that comes out on analog, I checked this morning, it just surpasses the digital by far. And it's a really well put together package, double gatefold, cut by Matthew Lutens at the Mastering Lab, with a very, very hefty and thick and well written booklet, even like pictures of the tapes. And in the booklets, we have words from Don Was, from Zev, from so many musicians I'm even getting into here. And like a constellation of people praising the record and talking about its importance. Let's jump in. Live at Slugs. Where did it come from, Zev?
Well, these recordings come from the personal tape archive of the great Jack DeJohnette, drummer and pianist and composer. And man, it's really been a blessing working on this project. It's certainly one of the most exciting that I've ever been involved with, literally at the tippy top of albums I've been involved with. And I think the reason is because these artists resonate with us. They're so important. And I think I speak for a lot of us that we've spent so many years listening to their catalog of recordings. So to find something like this, it's very revelatory. And but it comes from his tape archives. Just to give you the backstory, around 2019, I started working with Blue Note Records as a consulting archival producer for Don Was at the label. And around that time, I was also introduced to Jack DeJohnette. When I worked on the Bill Evans Some Other Time release several years back, I got to know a gentleman, a lawyer named Stephen Reich, who's based in Berlin. And Stephen actually worked with the Bruno Sphere family. And Stephen was involved in that Resonance release Some Other Time, Bill Evans, which was a major discovery. Anyways, Stephen knew that I was looking for previously unissued recordings and really special stuff. So literally just around the time I started working at Blue Note, Stephen said, I want to introduce you to Jack. You know, he has some tapes and some things you might want to look into. So he put us together and I started traveling upstate New York. And I remember meeting with Jack and Lydia DeJohnette, his wife, my co-producers on this release, around this time. And they had this tape reel. It was a 7-inch tape reel, quarter-inch. And, it was from Slugs, and it was McCoy and Joe with Henry Grimes and Jack. And from the very first time I heard it, I think I speak for a lot of us now that are starting to hear it for the first time. I heard In and Out, and my jaw was on the floor. So it's been a long road, a number of years now, putting this project together, vetting it, doing all the necessary steps, because there's a lot that goes into it. But this is so meaningful for me personally, for the fans, for all of us. I feel like we're in this together, and it's been exciting hearing the feedback. I hate the hype stuff because there's no hype. All you got to do is listen. And I'm going to give you some more streams of consciousness, forgive me. But I think there are a lot of us. You guys have seen these posters from Slugs. Jim Harrison, who worked at Slugs years ago, started sharing these online, and they've circulated. And you see Sun Ra, Larry Young, Art Blakey, Hank Mobley, Lee Morgan, and McCoy and Joe played there with this band. And I don't know about you, but I said to myself often, sheesh, if somebody had a tape running back then, wouldn't it be great to have an optic lens like into what was going on? This is a really special time capsule document, but it really captures this music at a very exciting time. There is just this energy that exists for me. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. And it's also very free at the same time. It's also straight ahead at the same time. There are all these elements, and there's this roux of all these different characteristics in these musicians that we love. But it's been exciting. What do you guys have to say about it?
So initially, Zev, to be honest, I was like, when I just saw the title announcement, how's the sounds gonna be? Is it gonna be something like worthwhile? Or they're just throwing it there? And then I requested a copy, and they sent me the digital files, the booklet. I was reading it, and I started playing this. I think it was the same feeling that you had when I play In and Out, and so it was like a 26-minute jam. And they just go in every direction, but they never lose focus. It's always there. The solos are so intense. The solos are so intense. It just feels like you're in the club. You're there. I think that's the best, simple, very simple explanation, but it just feels that you're there. And the level of skill, but not only skill, combined with the feeling that those guys are passing, I think that's the most compelling argument about that record. I think it's a winner beginning to end. And even the ballad, they go in from that speed from In and Out, side two, they go so, and the ballad is so sentimental. And then they go back full steam, taking off. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I wonder whoever had the chance to witness such a thing. And Jack DeJohnette is just like he's on fire.
Man, well, they're playing at this level of intensity and they don't let up. And I think it just reminds us of the quality and the types of performances of the music that was being made. I love that expressions, when giants walk this earth, and Jack is still here to talk about it. I'm also struck by a little bit of the history too now. Slugs, and I feel that we're connected here, is really one of these jazz shrines from the past, where again,
Yes.
the reputation of the people that played there and having this document. But there's a gentleman that made the tape, which is also very compelling and interesting for me personally. And his name was Orville O'Brien. He recorded Night of the Cookers that came out on Blue Note. He recorded he recorded Music Inc. from Charles Tolliver. He recorded Alice Coltrane. And he was an accomplished engineer. And also, there really was only a handful, at least at this time, that I can speak of, African-American recording engineers. For instance, you have the legendary Ray Hall, who ran RCA Studios in New York. You had my friend Bernard Drayton, who had a tape recorder. He was a Renaissance man, a photographer, an advertising executive. He recorded. But you had this Orville O'Brien guy. And by the way, Orville O'Brien was the stepfather of Guy O'Brien, aka Master G of the Sugar Hill Gang.
Oh, wow.
Tidbit of information. But I've often been really interested by this man, Orville O'Brien, too. And as Jack told me, he had a service that he would offer for the musicians where if you paid him, he would come out and record it for you. And he got a copy and the musicians got a copy. But think of this. Mr. DeJohnette's been holding on to this tape since 1966.
That's insane.
And it is insane. And I think it really is also gives us a lot of encouragement and hope that we're going to continue to make other sorts of discoveries. Great music is still coming to the surface, coming to light. And I use that word great because there is a distinction between good and great. And I think doing this kind of work for all the releases that I'm involved with, we strive for that distinction because it's important to add a new important chapter. But man, all you have to do is listen, and you feel, for me at least, I felt transported back to this room and had a chance to have a glimpse of what it must have been like. Now I really wonder what the heck were all the other nights like. I would love to have been hanging out there. So anyways.
The thing for me with this one is as soon as it got announced, just seeing the cover and then the dudes playing on, I mean, Henderson and Tyner and Henry Grimes and DeJohnette, I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, I have not been more excited for one of your releases beyond this one. This just seems like King of the Hill to me right now, especially where I feel like we're at in our jazz journey too. It just kind of hits all the check boxes for awesomeness. So
Yeah, and just to speak about the club environment, I know that Slugs is a storied place. I do have the Charles Tolliver Live at Slugs Volume 1 and 2. We've had Joe Harley on the channel, and he's kind of told us about his time at Slugs. That was kind of like his stomping ground.
Wow.
Lee Morgan, I believe that's where the famous, where he got shot. So this is a club of note. And one thing that I thought was really cool, Felipe, when you open up the gatefold, there's a picture of the club. So you can kind of get a better sense of place, um, uh, of Slugs. And I think that's just a cool piece of history. So beyond the music, just kind of understanding that space and what was happening there, I think is another added benefit of this, that just is adds to the interest, I think.
That picture, by the way, is from a really important photographer named Raymond Ross. And Ray Ross, as he was known by his friends and peers, was in New York, and he was like a frequenter at Slugs. That image, I believe, was originally in a publication called Sounds when they had an article about Slugs, but Mr. Ross took the picture. But it really, you get the vibes, man. I mean, when you're flipping through this, the hair literally, I would hope, maybe for me at least, it stands up even after all these years now being involved with this project, seeing it come to fruition. And I really want to thank Don Was for believing in this release. And I also want to thank Zach Shelby Cisco, who's our associate producer, who's tied with me at the hip, it seems, for so much of the great creative work that I do.
can you tell us where the cover photo came from?
Well, it's actually a couple of different images that Todd Galapo and Tori from Meat and Potatoes, they're a graphic design firm that work with Blue Note. They did an incredible job putting this project together. I mean, when you look at this cover, man, when we saw this, when we were working on the designs and seeing what they were coming up with, it was, I think, quite unanimous that this really had the vibes and the feels to it. But this is actually a couple of different photographs. That's a little inside baseball. And, that's, I hate to always reveal the magic tricks. I mean, when you're putting visually stuff together, there weren't pictures of them together. Okay. So this was really important to build but it has these elements and it feels really great. And I love that cover and I love just the picture of them together. just amazing.
We'll drop links to for everyone to be able to check these out and purchase them. We also are going to get into some RSD releases. So Record Store Day, Black Friday. Black Friday is coming up. And Zeb, you have a number of titles that are coming out. So I think we can jump into those. Is there any particular title you'd like to start with?
Your
Well, if
choice.
it's up to me, I would say the Sun Ra. This is I don't know if this is the second release that you've been associated with, but I know that last year you put out a Sun Ra. This year we have this one, and they're both live concerts that really shine a light into how it would be to experience the orchestra and be a part of that crowd. I've really enjoyed them, and we have friends on the channel that are going to be lining up for this title specifically. And I hope, I know, obviously it's limited based on what tapes are available, but I hope the Sun Ra, it becomes a series like Bill Evans, where it's just like we continue to get more and more of them. But we could start with this. So this is live at the Left Bank in Baltimore, correct?
That's
And do you want to tell us about maybe the discovery of the tape and the history of that?
Sure. So, like you were saying, I've been fortunate now. I've been building a relationship with the Sun Ra Estate, with their lawyer, Erwin Chusett, and also their chief archivist, Michael D. Anderson, who back in the day played percussion and toured with the band. He's actually
cool.
on this recording. And our first release that I did was actually on my Jazz Detective label, Sun Ra, the Showcase from 76 and 77 in Chicago. But this new release is really wonderful. It hit some nerves. Now, a lot of folks know this incredible documentary that the legendary filmmaker Robert Muggy made in 1980 or 81. It was called A Joyful Noise. And it was a movie about Sun Ra, and Robert Muggy spent time with him. In his movie, he actually recorded the second set of music from this evening captured in the summer of 1978. But the Sun Ra estate and the archives had the first set of music from that evening, which had never been shared before with the public. And it became a collaborative between us and the estate and Robert Muggy, who actually gave us some screen grabs from a recent print of his film so we could kind of illuminate the package. But all you need to do is listen. Some elements about this band. First of all, it's got John Gilmore and June Tyson, and it really represents the energy, the badness that exists in this group, especially in the 1970s. And this band was touring a lot. But something that I think sometimes gets overlooked by some people, maybe some people who aren't ready to necessarily take the dive in, and I think it should be encouraged that we all should be listening to more Sun Ra. There are these elements of the inside and the outside. Fletcher Henderson and Thelonious Monk is in this recording. His music, actually, Horace Henderson, who was Fletcher Henderson's brother. But this music was around Sun Ra. There was a part of his repertoire and his musical DNA. And we have this recording from 78, and it's never been out before. The tape stayed locked up until now, and we actually have a photograph in the package you can see of the tape reels. Also something very interesting. So I didn't learn this until recently, but Sonny, as he was called, Mr. Ra, Mr. Blount, I guess you could say, Sun Ra, he toured with recording engineers that were there, and they ran tape at so many of the concerts. There's probably thousands of hours, if I had to speculate, of Sun Ra material. So I've had the good fortune now, it's relationship building, it's proving yourself. And I certainly hope, as Mike was mentioning, it would be great if we could do a series, because I want to do more, but I really want to present the best Sun Ra music possible and also create an engaging package. The cover is graced, by the way, with this incredible photograph by the late Danish photographer Jan Persson. And anyways, it's just Burton Yount, one of the great designers that I work with, put it together. But I think it speaks to his greatness. We also interviewed the great Gary Bartz, who I learned not until recently, Sun Ra tried recruiting him for his band. And we also spoke with Craig Taborn. J.D. Considine was the great writer who wrote our liner notes, was actually there that evening, and it left a mark on him. So it was like, I really wanted to build the elements and bring it together. And we even spoke with Marshall Allen. So I take a look. There's this one photograph, by the way, on the cover of the booklet of Sun Ra taken in front of the house in the middle of the street in Germantown, Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And he's wearing this hat when we used it prominently in this EPK video that we made. But man, it's got all the feels. I want great music, but I want compelling packaging. And I want to transport you to out of this world, to another place. And the music does this. And anyways, I wish he was here to see what we're doing, but we're doing the best job that we can to help celebrate his legacy, like all these artists. So anyways, that's my spiel, if you will. What do you guys have to say?
I really enjoyed it. I've been getting more into Sun Ra. I've been exploring the El Saturn catalog of his, some of the singles of his. So these two releases have really kind of hit home for me. So I love the accessibility of having these. And I think this concert's really cool. I mean, it starts real fiery. There's a lot of space, in terms of like, like space jazz, like that type of style to it. But then it also comes back and there's a bit of straight ahead in there too. So it's really, when you think about an experience, it's not just like 45-minute set where it's a couple different styles, straight ahead ballad or something like that. This is really like a full kind of um, immersive feeling that he takes you through and or journey. So I absolutely love it, and I hope that you're able to continue putting out more of his concerts because it's just something that I'm particularly interested in right now. So I think this is a great one for people to check out and to start, if you're not into Sun Ra, to be able to start getting into his recording catalog.
Yeah.
Well said, man. Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, and after all, Sunrise is one of the pioneers, right? He comes from so early, right? He had such
Yeah,
a career, and people sometimes may get like misled just by his clothes or just think about the 70s image, all that free and crazy stuff. No, he did a little bit of everything throughout his career, right? And I think those concerts they really show that through in a great style. The sound restoration quality. Um, great. And it's good to see how they interact so well with the audience. Awesome.
I got to tell you, the first recordings that I think personally that I listened to from Sun Ra, I'm curious about you guys. I remember in the 1990s, the Evidence label, Jerry Gordon out of Philadelphia, was reissuing some of these recordings from the 50s and 60s.
Mhm.
And man, that was the big band experience. And yeah, Rocket Number 9 off to the planet Venus and interplanetary music and this incredible canon of great music. But I think there's so many sides to this guy. I got to tell you too, George Claben, my boss, my co-president and mentor at Resonance Records, one summer in the 1960s, he did an internship at ESP Disc in New York for Bernard Stolman. And he met Sun Ra, and George has a record, and Sun Ra signed it Herman Blount. He
oh
has
wow.
his personal collection I've seen before. I'm like drooling. I think it's so cool. But there's so much to this guy, and even if you haven't heard it all, or maybe you have, and a lot of people are familiar, but hey, he's a great artist to submerge yourself in and learn more about. And
Absolutely.
I'm really proud. Yeah, I'm really happy about this one. I love the
Yeah.
music.
I'm excited for this one too. One of the things that's interesting to me about Sun Ra is also his care for the music. Like he did not fool around with laziness and people showing up late and not giving 100%, right? And I think you hear that through his music, and also I love the space elements and just the production and the shows. I love hearing the music, but then you think about like what those shows must have been like with the stage elements and everything else that he put into it. It's really, really interesting stuff.
And they would even, I mean, I wasn't there. You see it, I believe, in Joyful Noise, if I recall correctly. But they would even come off the bandstand and march through the audience. And there was this visual element, which is often lost because we're listening to the music. But it was exciting. It was interesting. What about a guy who was ahead of his time? I mean, it's great. Also, guys, something I hope everyone will enjoy. We were lucky. The late, great journalist and music historian and raconteur, and so many other words to describe him and his greatness, Dan Morgenstern, who founded the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University. My friend Lauren Schoenberg, a lot of us know, said, Zev, you should be talking to Dan. And we actually had one of the last conversations with him, and we talked about Sun Ra, and it's in the booklet, but he shares a story of seeing Louis Armstrong in Central Park, and who comes to sit next to him but Sun Ra. And it was a warm day, he says, and he was dressed in a costume like he would love the things that we see him wearing. But and he talks about seeing the reaction of Sun Ra, and Dan Morgenstern said Sun Ra knew his Louis. And this was a really diverse guy in terms of musicality and all these different elements that influenced him. Anyways, I had to throw that in there. I thought it was wonderful reading that part and having that conversation. I fell out of my chair.
Yeah. And just one last thing, we'll move on to the next one. But Sun Ra was born, I think, in 1914. So when you think about his, like Felipe, you were saying, like his kind of early formation period, like Dizzy Gillespie, he was born 1917. Frank Sinatra was born 1915. So he's an early guy. And I just point that out because that's something that I wasn't totally familiar with. I didn't realize how he dated back to that era. So he is a great musician to explore, and he develops his own world, and it's really fun to learn about it. So, all right, so let's move on to the next one. Felipe, where should we go?
You want to do the resonance or the elemental now, Zev?
How about we do the resonance ones? Let's go in a wave here.
Okay.
All right. So we have two releases by Resonance. So two, I think we haven't seen them on Record Store Day before, much less on their label. First one, it's a double live records, two live records, one double, the other one is a triple. This is the double, is the Al Jarreau. Wow. Live at the Child Herald in DC. I I was a kid in the 80s. He was all over the place. You hear about him. He's everywhere, even like We Are the World. He was a USA for Africa. He was everywhere, right? He was this omnipresent figure. I was familiar with his music, but not totally. And when I got this release here, I was reading about it, reading the liner notes, the history behind it. But putting all that aside, I've been saying that it's one of the best live performances by a vocalist I've ever heard, because he's a guy at the very early in his career, like hungry to get there. He was getting there. He was getting very popular in those days. But even like in an early age, he owns the audience, the concert. He does his scatting, he sings, he talks, and the way that sound comes across the mic, it just sounds he's in the room there. You can hear, you can feel his breath. So it's a perfect example combination of sound quality, recording quality, and a performance quality. I think you check all check marks there. And I was actually floored. I did not expect that greatness of that record. Yeah, how did it come to fruition? How do you like it? Well,
I I love it. And listen, like growing up, I remember when Breaking Away came out. I remember being 10 years old that summer when Boogie Down hit the radio. He had these pop elements, right? But let's not overlook he's a jazz vocalist and it's in his DNA. And this was a very special artist. Now, this project is really personal for me. I in the early 2000s, I was very lucky. I worked for Universal Music Group and I used to represent the Verve Music Group and I used to represent GRP Records. And being a representative of the company here in Washington, this was a big marketplace for Al Jarreau, and he would come when he'd promote his records. We would do CD signings at Kemp Mill Records and Tower Records. And one time he sang a national anthem at a Washington Wizards basketball game, and we hung out a night together in the skybox. And even my mom and dad met him. All of my family is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he's from. And I'll never forget this one time that he and I were together. I think it was Black Entertainment Television was having a dinner with some executives, and the company said, Zeb, why don't you come along and join us? Al will be there. And Al and I sat next to each other at dinner, and people were talking amongst themselves. And he started chatting with me. Now, I have to tell you something. We can talk about this man's greatness in terms of musically and his artistic strength and his individuality. There was no other Al Jarreau. Al Jarreau was this force and a one of a kind. But he was also an incredible human being. You know, he was a social worker in a past life. He had an ability of connecting and talking with people. And in my early 20s, mid 20s, when I worked with him, I was this introverted kid, so to speak. I'm still kind of that way. And I'll never forget him talking with me. And I remember one night at this dinner we had, he said, Zev, you know the first place I ever played in Washington, D.C.? And I said, no, where'd you play? I played a place called the Child Herald. And if you know Washington, D.C., this was a legendary room in DuPont Circle in D.C., and actually News 4, NBC News Washington, the local NBC affiliate, just did a story. You can even Google NBC News 4 Al Jarreau, and it'll tell you the story. That was the first place that Bruce Springsteen played in Washington. Bonnie Raitt, Emmylou Harris, Linda Ronstadt, they played. And in 76, they booked Al Jarreau. Folks, he was swinging for the fences early in his career, making an impression upon people in these audiences. And it's an inspiring performance. All you need to do is listen. The energy is so high. It's an uplifting recording, but it gets really interesting. Last year, I have a good friend, Alex Courtwright, and my buddy Alex, who's worked in radio for decades, introduced me to a guy named David Einstein, who was the former operations manager of WHFS Radio. And in this time, it was freeform radio. They played the Grateful Dead. They played Bonnie Raitt. They played blues. They played reggae. And they had Al Jarreau in the studio, and they had a professional sound truck, Sonority Sound, and an engineer in a sound truck named Roger Bird, who came out, and they recorded this concert. They mixed it live. And last year, I'm at David Einstein's home going through some tapes, and I'm going through stuff, and all of a sudden I see this tape reel, Al Jarreau, Child Herald. In fact, there's a reproduction of the tape reel box on the back of the insert. Oh my God, was I gobsmacked? And all of a sudden, these memories flashed back of Al telling me that this was his first gig. But from the first listen, it was like, again, that distinction I was talking about, good and great, extremely powerful. And my boss, George Clavin, my mentor, my co-president, I said, George, do you like Al Jarreau? I love Al Jarreau. George, listen to this. We had the tapes transferred to Commodore Recording Studios in Thurmont, Maryland, initially, and George was taken with it. So we did a deal. I'm sorry to get so long in the tooth here. We
Oh,
did,
wow.
thank you. We did a deal with Warner Music to put it out. I worked something out with Mr. Einstein, with the musicians and the estate, of course. And then we went to Matthew Luthen's at the Mastering Lab in Salina, Kansas. And because we can't always do this, but because the quality of the original tape source was so great, this is an all analog recording cut from the tape right to the lacquer. And Matt did an unbelievable job. But all you got to do is listen. And you know what? If we were going to do this, I was like, I want to pay tribute to Al Jarreau. And it was kind of like putting the band back together because my good friend of many years, Jay St. Laurent Smythe at Noir Publicity, she'd worked on Al projects and knew him going back to the 1980s. And we worked together in the early 2000s when she was promoting the GRP records. We brought her on. She is actually an associate producer, but this record pays tribute. I mean, some of the people we spoke to, Nile Rodgers, Dionne Warwick, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Will Downing, Philip Bailey of Earth, Wind and Fire, keyboardist Tom Canning that plays on here, Gerald Albright, Manhattan Transfer. And it's pressed at Vinylist. It's 180 grams. And Luthen's did an amazing job. A. Scott Galloway wrote the lead essay. A lot of people know him from Wax Poetics magazine. And also Richard Harrington, who was the former music critic of the Washington Post. We tell the whole story. We celebrate Al, and I really wanted to uplift his legacy and use this as an opportunity. If you guys knew him, he had an ability of making you feel when you were with him that you were 10 feet tall, and he would lift the mood in the room. I love this man. And the time that I spent, if you went through what I did, you would walk over hot coals for this guy. And this record really celebrates his genius. Oh my God. Sorry for the mouthful. Woo!
Great.
Sorry. I get excited though. This is what I do. I love this.
No, it's great. I just personally, I love hearing about the curation aspect of it, the thought and details that went into the release. So thank you for sharing that.
How about Emily Remler?
All right.
Yes.
Oh man. Thanks, Chris.
Oh man, again, I don't know. Something about this year for you is just hitting all my check boxes. I got into Emily like 6 months ago. I've been seeking out all her records she did on Concord. Amazing player from the West Montgomery School, you could say, I guess, to start off her career. Her records are kind of hard to find. You know, they're not super expensive, but they're just hard to find. And seeing this 3 LP set of her, concert work in Vegas with a trio and quartet was super exciting. I've listened to it a couple of times. It's just it's my favorite thing you've released. I haven't heard the Slugs yet, so that might take over the first place. But this release is super exciting. She's an undersung, to me at least, guitar god. So tell us about this one, Zev.
I've been on a crusade, a mission, it feels like, for decades. I had those Concord records years ago, and I've really been taken by her music, her artistry. And I've also felt that for some reason it's been tragic there, besides the fact that she sadly passed away when she was 32 years old, and she's been gone for 34 years now. This is the first new release of unissued material in 34 years. And it's actually the very first official live recording of her entire discography. And studio versus live is a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
I befriended Emily's sister, Jane Remler Blank, probably about 6 years ago, just because I was a fan of Emily's. Hey, do you have any tapes or anything? And she didn't, but we built this friendship and a lot of trust and goodwill. And, I worked a few years back on this Shirley Horn record, Live at the Four Queens. And these tapes come from KNPR. Now, listen, full disclosure, some folks have heard some of this material because it comes from some radio broadcasts that were from this radio program that was from KNPR that was actually on YouTube. However, we found the tape reels, and the great author and legendary journalist Bill Melkowski, who wrote the biography of Jaco Pastorius, and Michael Brecker wrote a book on jive jazz, guys like Cab Calloway and Slim Gaillard. He's so incredible, Bill, and he's really a guitar aficionado.
Mm-hmm.
But we found the original tape reels, and we also took the responsibility of curating a new experience, not just those broadcasts that were available, but trying to maximize what a great 3 LP, 2 CD set would be. And this album includes 60 minutes of music that was never broadcast, never shared publicly. And I wanted to pay tribute to her. It's been a travesty that her legacy has almost been brushed under the rug. And I felt that we could be advocates for her. We could try to rise the tide. We could celebrate her. We could talk about her. And we interviewed 22 different artists. You know, she left a mark on the jazz world. And she's also has continued to influence and inspire future generations of musicians that have followed. But, you know, she was definitely influenced by Wes Montgomery, Pat Martino. Now, here's something a lot of people didn't know. She toured with Astrid Gilberto. So she knew how to play Brazilian music too. And these recordings of a quartet from 1984 and a trio from 1988, to me, really shed a light on her and give you an idea of her greatness. And I think that it's just like, you know what? I want people to be saying her name. I want people to celebrate her. And this release has a lot of meaning for me. George Claben came along and said, we can do this, and let's do this. And this is important. And, but you know, we mastered this one, by the way, with Bernie Grundman. It's 180 gram pressing. It's a 3 LP set. And Levinalist, once again, this incredible pressing plant in Canada that we work with. Sometimes they say 180. Sometimes the pressings have even been upwards of closer to 200. We've noticed they do very high quality work. But anyways, we have all these wonderful photographs: Jean-Pierre Loire, Tom Copy, Brian McMillan, Bill Milkowski. Again, he was in the DNA of this project. He did not just write liner notes, which of course he did, but he was involved with the vetting of the music, the foundation of this recording. And he's also writing a piece that's going to be in the January issue of Downbeat magazine that I hope folks will check out. But look, we spoke with Cheryl Bailey. Oh my gosh, Russell Malone, like one of the last interviews, I suspect. I had messaged him, hey, can we talk about Emily? My phone rings. I'm ready to go. I got some stories. Mark Ruffin, by the way, at XM, programs Real Jazz and Watercolors. He spent time with her too. And you're going to hear music. If you listen to Real Jazz in the car, you're going to hear her. David Benoit, Mike Stern, Rodney Jones, Mimi Fox, Jocelyn Gould, a whole host of folks. But it's an incredible package. It's great music, but it really is meant to celebrate her music and her greatness. And I hope folks will, again, say her name, talk to your friends about it, just put it on and listen. It's been way too long, and I'm really proud, and I wish she could be here, and she is sorely missed. And I want to thank her family for believing in us and doing this project too. Anyways, there's a mouthful again. Woof. Sorry, I get wound up.
No, I mean, I can't overestimate how important this release is to me, at least. She's just amazing. I want to read a quote from an interview. She was in this People magazine interview, and it's in the liner notes.
Yeah.
And they asked, I don't know what they asked her, but she said, I may look like a nice Jewish girl from New Jersey, but inside I'm a 50-year-old heavyset black man with a big thumb like Wes Montgomery. I just love that quote because it's so true. The swing she had was insane. Her, I don't know. People need to listen to her music. It's so good. And I wanted to talk about just some of the tunes on this one. I mean, it starts out with Moanin', which is just nuts. Autumn Leaves, Samba de Orfeo, which is freaking amazing Luis Bonfa song. What were some of the other ones that I was West Coast Blues? And then one of my favorites was on the last side. It's So What and Impressions, and I just thought it was just wonderful. So anyway, highly recommend everyone pick this one up as your top priority for Record Store Day, in my opinion.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was just thinking about her trajectory, right? I mean, her tragic death and her lack of recognition, mostly for being a woman, as we know to this day. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, most women, like in jazz in general, the vocalists are highly recognized. They get everything, but the ones that actually play instruments, they always like, I know, there's always a guy that's better. Is interesting, right?
Well, I think it was very, listen, this landscape was heavily male dominated. Let's say that, right?
Yeah.
And she had this individuality, and it really wasn't about that for her. But she certainly was a trailblazer in the field. And yeah, she was a woman in this heavily male dominated landscape. And but she had a voice and artistry. And by the way, she was, like, I understand it, discovered, if I'm not mistaken, by Herb Ellis, who took a liking to her, who brought her to Carl Jefferson at Concord.
Mhm.
And anyway, she's gone, but not forgotten. Not
Absolutely.
forgotten. And you can read all about her. There's never been a book about her, but the written material, the editorial in this booklet alone is incredible. There's so much, and read what Bill Milkowski has written. It's very insightful.
Absolutely. I read it this morning. It's just wonderful, man. I really appreciate this release.
Thank you. Thanks so much for saying that. Appreciate that.
All right, let's go on to our next title. So I think we have two more left.
Yeah, two more from Elemental. Yeah.
Which one are we going to, Felipe?
So let's go alphabetically. Let's start with the BB King. BB King in France. So this is sort of continuation, right, of the French recordings to Sister Rosetta Tarp. So this is BB King in 1977, October 7, 77. This is quite an unusual thing. Right? We think about BB King very early or very late. His famous late 60s live recordings. And this was recorded in a foreign country without his own band. And the result is beautiful. And I think just BB King in France, look deeper and listen to it, because it's BB King playing with a septet, a jazz septet, and they all pretty much just were jamming there, but they talk really, really well. And he seems so at ease with the band. He seems so relaxed. And I think the music shines and comes across. I mean, it's a beautiful rendition. Here's the package. I love this picture.
Oh man, Osier Mohammed. That picture was actually taken at Cook County Jail when he was recording that album. Osier Mohammed was there. You might know Mr. Mohammed's work. He even contributed a photo or two for the Lee Morgan Live at the Lighthouse. That picture was so powerful. And I look at lots of images, but I want to talk to you about why this recording matters and what's so unique about this. Now, this was BB King's touring band. This band, as far as I know, did not go into the studio. And as far as I understand it, Chris Morris of Variety magazine, who actually wrote our press release, he was so blown away. He said, this is the only recording with BB's touring band. And this was a band that was on the road constantly in the 70s. And if you saw BB King, this was the group that you saw. But there's some other striking things about this recording as well. There's a lot of playing out, stretching out by BB King. There's even an instrumental or two that is on this record. And it's a different, BB was such a studio album kind of guy. And of course, live at the Regal Cook County Jail. I have a lot of BB King records, and I've been listening since my teens. I actually had the good fortune of meeting this man in the early 2000s and saw him a couple of times. I I'm not gonna lie, I've listened to this thing probably about 13 or 14 times since I got my finished product. And it's something that I just keep going through over and over. And Sweet 16 and the Thrill is gone, but I think it's I Need My Baby, or Why I Sing the Blues. Man, these are some incredible performances, but this was the touring band. And again, you get an instrumental side, which shows you his guitar virtuosic, strength and how great of a musician he was. And it's also this band with Cato Walker on alto sax and BB's nephew, Walter King, in the band too. But this is the band that traveled with him the most. And there's this cohesiveness. And yeah, I've had the good fortune now of working with INA in France. They're the ones that have the legendary ORTF and Radio France radio archives. And they had the original tape reels. And they were recorded exceptionally well with an amazing team. I believe that it was Andre Francis, if I'm not mistaken, that was the producer of the original broadcast. But just listen, 1977, the Nancy Jazz Pulsations Festival in Nancy, France is great. It's not just good, it's great, BB King. And it's like a new chapter. It's something different that stands out from a lot of the other records that are already out there before. And having the touring band. Anyways, BB King, I love him. And I hope that other folks will check it out too.
Awesome.
Absolutely, people will check that one out. I think it's interesting too that it's a blues release is nice. I'm hoping it'll help people cross over to find some of your other projects.
Oh, thanks, man. I hope so too. It's like that Deep Digs imprint that I created, and working with again Jordi Soleil and Carlos Agustin Calmbert at Elemental Music. They gave me this imprint a few years ago. I wanted to make a label group so that I could have Jazz Detective for my jazz releases, and then other heritage music like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, which came out last April. We put on this imprint, and I want to thank Christian Lunaire at INA, who has been working with me now for over a decade. Larry Young, Grant Green, Mal Waldron, Cannonball Adderley, Wes Montgomery. We put out a lot of important music from that archives, and this BB King is right in line. And stay tuned. There's going to be other stuff coming too that we're working towards at least. So really
And
happy.
those recordings, I mean, Fred over at Sam Records has put out a lot of their recordings too. They're all just
He has.
wonderfully recorded. They sound great.
Yeah. Oh man. Fred Tomas is great. And you're right. He's been working with Ina as well. Nathan Davis and George Avantis. I'm sorry, the pianist. Anyways, it's really nice that it's like a international musical diplomatic mission that we're on. And I love the fact that an American label can work with a European, a French company, and do all this important work together. It's all about the music and about the art, and sometimes the stars and the moon align themselves, and this kind of magic can happen.
Shout out to that Larry Young release that you did. I have a copy of it, and it is one of my favorites. So that is definitely one for people to go and check out. All right, so let's move on. We have our final release, saving Bill Evans for last. Let's see it, Zev.
Bill Evans in Norway.
All right, so this one is in Norway, Eddie Gomez and Marty Morell. This is in concert. So do you want to walk us through the backstory for this one?
I will. So Jordi Soleil and Carlos Agustin Calmbert at Elemental Music in the last year and a half or so have struck up a relationship with the Kongsberg Jazz Festival in Norway. And they have a rich archive of concerts that have never seen the light of day before, not just good, but great performances. And this is a recording from 1970 with, like you said, Eddie Gomez and Marty Morell. And frankly, this is like one of my personal favorites, this trio. Again, we talk about a cohesiveness, a trio and a group that played together so much. This band played together longer than any of Bill Evans's other groups. And that should be noted. Almost like these guys have telepathic powers, if you will, and they can read each other. And that comes out in the music. some very inspiring performances. Bill is in a good mood. He sounds relaxed. You can also read Mark Myers at Jazzwax. He wrote the liner notes, and I think he's incredibly insightful on the way he tells the story. But also you could read online on Jazzwax too. He wrote a piece about it. But it's never been out before, and it's really special. There's something about Bill Evans's performances. Every time he kept reaching from within, night after night, when he would do these concerts, and there's always something different, different elements, different nuances, and it's really quite extraordinary. We spoke to Craig Taborn and pianist Aaron Parks for this release too, kind of to get their insight. I love speaking with different musicians about their feelings about music. But anyways, this is my 12th project. I can't believe it. Working with Evan Evans and the Bill Evans estate. And it's really been a blessing, and having that trust from the family. And I'm really proud of this. Again, it's a great document, a great release, and it's recorded exceptionally well. And it captures Bill in a great performance, in a great mood, and great performances. And you can check it out. We also we had an interview from Bill from 1970 that we included, and we did an interview with Randy Hewlett, who was there at the concert too. Anyways, listen, if you like Bill Evans, it's a great release. I think that it really celebrates his legacy, and it's amazing. He's been gone now 44 years, and we're talking about him, and I want to thank Evan Evans and the estate for believing in the work that me and my teams do. I've done releases with Elemental, and we've also done releases with Resonance. There's going to be another Resonance release next year. There's also going to be another Elemental project coming too. But we're finding things that add a chapter, that are special. This is exceptional. And all you need to do is listen. And again, we had the tape reels that we found that we were able to work with. And stay tuned. We're working with this festival. There's going to be an Art Pepper project coming. That's one of Jordi Soleil's favorite. One of mine too, for that matter. That'll be coming from Kongsberg. So
What year would that be?
The Art Pepper?
Yeah.
Around 1980.
Okay.
Oh my
Very
God.
cool.
We'll
Very
be
nice.
able to share more about that too. And I don't want to let all
Okay.
my
Excellent.
sales yet, but I'll hopefully
Yeah.
be able to join forces with you guys and talk about it.
Awesome. Very nice.
That's pretty awesome.
Felipe, what did you think of the Bill Evans release?
I love the release because again, it's a different period in time, and they had just come out of Montreux. The band had just got, Marty Morell had just joined the band. They were like starting there, and you can see, we pass our like a baptism. Now let's just be happy and do what we want. And I think also, like, it's in Norway, it's a different type of audience. People really pay attention. The theater has such a great acoustics, and they're so meticulous in the recording. The music shines, comes across again. It's very uplifting. Sometimes with Bill Evans, you can kind of tell the kind of mood of his like walk of light that he's in, and he had just gotten clean for some time. He was doing methadone treatments at the Rockefeller, if I'm not mistaken. I think it says there. So he was great, like physically, mentally in a good place. And Marty Morell just joined the band, and Eddie Gomez as usual. I mean, they were on fire. They were on fire. They were free. They were light. It's a sharp contrast from like stuff that we hear from like 65, 66, 62. It was like a mourning period for him. So now he's like entering the 70s. I mean, he wouldn't last long, like in a good like physical shape, but still he was in a really good place here, and I think it's very opportune to see a different face, a different side of the Bill Evans trio at that specific and important point in time.
Oh man, you're really selling this to me. I mean, I've got so many Bill Evans records that I'm like, do I need to buy more Bill Evans records? But hearing this, your description of this, I think I'm gonna have to pick this one up next week.
It is different. I mean, even like the Buenos Aires ones, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, I'm very
fantastic. Those records are so good. They're
they
so
are.
good, those ones in Buenos Aires.
All right, so we went over the Blue Note release, Joe Henderson, McCoy Tyner at Slugs. We also touched on 5 record store day titles. So, I think what we wanted to accomplish here was to prepare people for record store day so that, they're informed about some of the titles that they'll be able to pick up. So please let us know in the comments what you think about this. And Zev, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just really want to express my gratitude to everyone out there that goes out and supports these releases. And it can't happen without the fans out there who are picking up these albums. It allows us to keep going, and it's not lost on me. And I know sometimes it's not always an ideal situation. People like to gripe sometimes, and I'm always sympathetic. But at the end of the day, we're able together collectively to join forces in this mission. And by the support, we're able to keep going. There's going to be some wonderful stuff coming next year that I'm involved with. Just amazing stuff that I can't wait to start talking about soon. But I want to kind of keep under wraps, but there are going to be some surprises, some artists that haven't had recordings in years, and some music that's going to move everyone. But I want to thank all of you for having me back again. I want to thank the fans out there. And as I like to say, let's keep going. There's more important work for us to do. And it's just gratifying beyond belief as a fan, and also getting a chance, the privilege and honor to work on this. And I also want to give a shout out again to Zach Shelby Cisco, who has been working with me now for over a decade. I tell people when he came along, it was like taking the limiter off the Millennium Falcon, and like we went off into the stars, and we're doing a lot together, but it's because of everyone out there and all of you guys. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for having me today.
Well, thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Zeb.
No, we thank you, Zev, and yeah, and also shout out to Zach. He's very, very great in coordinating all this. Very great person to deal with. He's doing amazing work with you as well.
He's incredible, absolutely incredible.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Happy Record Store Day, Black Friday, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.